Your boy got a green screen. I can put anything I want up there. Anything. And oh yeah, we're making long videos now. I don't have a pop filter for this microphone, so hopefully I don't fucking pop my peas too much. Apologize to your eardrums. But y'all remember the Black Crowes? Because I don't. That's mostly because I was -8 years old when their debut album came out. But honestly, this is a band that was on top of the world for about 2.5 years. Songs like Hard to Handle, She Only Talks to Angels, Remedy, that one's overrated, were absolutely blowing up radio stations for the first quarter of the 90s. And then they kind of just disappeared. And we haven't yet identified a culprit for this disappearance. I can't think of any reasons. But over the course of this video, I'm going to go through the history of the Black Crowes. Were they overrated? Were they underrated? Or were they just rated? Because you are going to find out. Most likely by listening to someone else, because I'm too to have good music taste. The Black Crowes were founded in the year of our Lord 1984 by two brothers, Chris Robinson on the vocals and Rich Robinson on guitar, in Atlanta, Georgia, where they played in various clubs that Rich would have to literally sneak into because he was only 15 at the time. And actually, they weren't even called the Black Crowes yet. They were called Mr. Crow's Garden, named after the two brothers' favorite childhood book, Mr. Crow's Garden. In 1987, Steve Gorman joined the band as a drummer so that they could record some demos for REM's manager, Jefferson Holt's record label named Doggone. That's a weird sentence. They were given a record deal from this, but they decided to decline and continued playing in New York clubs in '88, adding Johnny Colt on the bass and Jeff Cease on guitar, which solidified their core starting five, I have a mouse in my hand. Starting five lineup for the next 4 years. In 1989, they finally signed a record deal with Def American after meeting with George Draculis. They met with fucking Nosferatu, who encouraged them to play covers of the Rolling Stones and try to emulate bands like the Faces. And finally, to round out the decade, they changed their name to the Black Crowes. But that was not before Rick Rubin, and yes, that Rick Rubin, encouraged them to change their name to the Cobb County Crows, with all Ks. In 1990, the Black Crowes released their debut album, Shake Your Moneymaker, and it did all right. And by all right, I mean it was number 3 on Billboard's year-end Hot 100, sold 5 million copies, and went 5 times platinum. To be honest, I don't really even know what platinum means, but I think it's funnier that I make this long-ass video about music, and I just refuse to look it up. There were 6 singles off this album, 2 of which peaked in the top 30 of the Billboard charts, and both of which made it to number 1 on the rock charts, those being Hard to Handle and She Only Talks to Angels. And fun fact, apparently Rich wrote She Only Talks to Angels when he was 15 years old, which makes me feel very accomplished and successful in life. They toured around with Metallica, AC/DC, Motley Crue, and ZZ Top, the latter of which ended up booting them off the tour since they wouldn't stop opening their shows with "This live rock and roll is being brought to you commercial-free," when they were supposed to be sponsored by Miller Lite Beer, which, hey, I guess that's a pretty fucking rock and roll thing to do. When it comes to music on the album, it bangs, dude. The guitar riffs are super tight. It's chock full of catchy hooks and choruses. There was a clear inspiration from 60s and 70s rock bands like the Stones, the Faces, Aerosmith, and Dave Marsh from Entertainment Weekly. Okay, that sentence made it seem like Dave Marsh was inspiring them, but I'm pointing out a quote from Dave Marsh. He said, "The Black Crowes are to the early Rolling Stones what Christian Slater is to the young Jack Nicholson, a self-conscious imitation, but fine enough in its own right." And I think that's a very fair statement. And it almost reminds me of what Greta Van Fleet is to Led Zeppelin. Like, yeah, they're doing their best to imitate Led Zeppelin, but like, are you really gonna complain about more Led Zeppelin songs? I'm not gonna pretend like this is one of the greatest albums of all time. They're not breaking new ground. They're probably in the same league as like the Faces, but they're nowhere near the Stones or Aerosmith. And I gave Shake Your Moneymaker a solid 8.75 out of 10. And aggregating a couple of professional critics, they averaged out to about a 7.68 out of 10. Between 1990 and 1992, the Black Crowes added Eddie Harsh. I'm just going to call him Eddie on the piano/keyboard, and replaced Jeff Cease with Mark Ford on guitar. And in 1992, they released their second album, The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, which is too many words for an album name. In Southern Harmony, the Black Crowes did just as the title stated and added a little bit more Southern flair to their... What the fuck was that? And added a little bit more Southern flair to their music, tuning in with some harmonica on songs like The Black Moon Creeping, and getting really Southern with their cover of Bob Marley's Time Will Tell, and all of which I think are a great fit for the band. I also love the addition of Mark Ford on this album. They absolutely let him rip to start off the record on Sting Me, which is probably my favorite track on the album. Remedy was the highest charting song on this album, reaching number 48. And honestly, I don't really get it. The band states the song's about the war on drugs, but like, I don't know, man. The lyrics of the song, they don't feel very connected together, and I don't think the chorus is very catchy, and it's so ambiguous with the lyrics that it really could be about anything you want. So like, sure, it's about the war on drugs. I don't know. My personal favorites, though, are Sting Me, Black Moon Creeping, and Bad Luck Blue Eyes. I think this album doesn't have quite as many catchy hooks and riffs as their debut, but I do like the more southern direction it takes, so it gets a 6.75 out of 10 from me. Commercially, this album sold a little bit over 2 million records, so about half of their first album, but did climb up to number 1 on the weekly charts, which the first one did not, surprisingly. And the average professional score is a 8.65 out of 10. So, multiple sources state the Black Crowes spent 93 working on an album called Tall that ended up being scrapped, but when I looked at the supposed track list, like, a good chunk, if not pretty much all of Tall, is just on their 1994 album, Amorica. So I don't really understand why it's considered a scrapped album, maybe just a renamed album, but I digress. In 1994, the Black Crowes released Amorica, which is a blend of the Spanish word amor, meaning love, and obviously the word America, which this album isn't really centered around loving America at all. They state the name means more to like love those around you or love thy neighbor, but like, I don't know. I don't really get that out of this album, but sure. The album cover of this one is a picture of some girl's panties with her bush popping out that was in Hustler's magazine in the 70s, which, like, is this what guys in the 70s were cranking it to? And, of course, it was a huge point of contention as stores like Kmart and Walmart wouldn't sell the CD on their shelves, so they had to create an alternative cover that I have way less jokes for. The album itself keeps some of its southern influence from the previous album and infuses a lot more psychedelic sound into it, which is awesome. I like it. I have a similar review to the previous album in that I love the direction the band is going with that more southern rock mixed with psychedelic sounds. It's a hard one to pull off, but this album also doesn't have the same catchy hooks as their debut. And call me a normie, but I love me some hooks. Highlights are High Head Blues and P25 London for me. Chris also tries to create like a Red Hot Chili Peppers-esque flow on Conspiracy, and like, dog, you're just not funky enough to pull that off. Now, I think this album holds up to their previous work, but it only peaked at 11th on the weekly billboards and sold around 500,000 copies, so I guess let's take a look at what bands were beating the Black Crowes in the charts in 1994. We got Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam. Yeah, loud southern rock was definitely not in style anymore. There are probably a lot of musical eras in history where the Black Crowes would have seen a decade and a half of sustained commercial success. 1990 to 1995 was absolutely not one of them. This album pretty much cemented the fall of this band from a massive commercial success to having nothing more than a kind of a small cult following. I still think this is slightly better than the second album. It gets a 7 out of 10 for me, and the aggregate critic score is around a 7.9 out of 10. While touring for their previous album, Chris and Rich Robinson were at each other's throats the entire time. That's going to be a reoccurring theme throughout the rest of this video. And in 1996, the Black Crowes began working on their 4th studio album that was soon to be known as Three Snakes and One Charm. They actually started creating this album with Rich and Chris on opposite sides of the country, where Rich would write the songs in Atlanta and then send the songs to his brother in LA to listen to them. They don't explicitly state this is because they were fighting, but I imagine that has to play a part. Eventually, the band decided to actually rent a house they dubbed the Chateau de la Croix. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? In Atlanta, and ended up making Three Snakes and One Charm. For the album itself, it's a bit more jam bandy and the style's a bit all over the place. It has a couple good tracks like Good Friday and Under a Mountain, but the singing just feels a little bit too bland for me. And the lead single, Blackberry, is terrible. The record sales were unreported. Critics average around a 6.3 for this one. I gave it a 4.5. I'm not a huge fan. Also, the start of Evil Eye just has to be a meme format. This is illegal. This is illegal. This is illegal. In 1997, the Crowes recorded an album called Band, which their label American Records rejected. So the Crowes kind of left American Records to go to Columbia Records, but from 1997 to 2001, Columbia Records actually had the rights to distribute American Records songs, so I'm assuming They actually moved record labels, and they weren't just distributing under Columbia Records, but like I don't really understand all this label stuff. What I do know is they're not very fond of the famous American Records founder Rick Rubin, known for producing, well, pretty much everything. Another big change was that lead guitarist Mark Ford developed quite the heroin problem and was told to clean up or get out. And he was not on the next album. And bassist Johnny Colt was so uninterested in the band at this point, he actually just dropped out and became a yoga instructor. Whoops. So instead of releasing Band, the Black Crowes worked on their 5th studio album, By Your Side, with Sven Pipian. Sven Pipian? Sven. Fucking Swedish people, dude. Putting an S and a V next to each other. That should be illegal. They added him to bass. He was playing bass for the band, though. From a musical standpoint, By Your Side is a return to the Black Crowes' roots, sounding a lot more like Shake Your Moneymaker than their previous 2 to 3 albums. It adds a couple small subtleties that their debut didn't have, and has a couple songs that I like, including Diamond Ring and the title track, but to be frank, it sounds like a less interesting imitation of a great album that was already an imitation of better bands. It ended up selling 270,000 records, and critics gave it an aggregate score of 6.75. I gave it a 6. Maybe I'm just a little harsher than critics are. I don't know. After releasing By Your Side, the Black Crowes went on an extended tour with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin and The Who. And Chris Robinson married Kate Hudson. Like, relax, dude. We get it. You're like really fucking cool or whatever. Here's a fun fact about Chris Robinson and Kate Hudson. They met on a Friday night and moved in together on that Sunday. They also left Columbia Records and joined V2 Records due to Columbia not promoting By Your Side very well as forcing the band to make something that sounds similar to Shake Your Moneymaker. In 2001, they released Lines, which is by far their worst album. I'm pretty sure the lead single, Lickin', is about beating an underage woman. Like, the chorus is, I'm kicking, girl, you gonna catch a lickin'. Then they proceed to describe that girl as the doorknob queen of the underage. I have no idea what a doorknob queen is. I hear underage, and I hear the underage person is catching a lickin'. Doubt this is actually what they meant to say, but I have no idea what else they were trying to say. I gave this album a 2 out of 10, and the critic score was around a 4.75, so definitely a low point in the career. And after Lines, they went on tour with Oasis, and years later, Chris and Rich went on the Howard Stern show and stated that they made Oasis uncomfortable with how aggressively they fought. Oasis, the band that literally had an infamous breakup from Noel and Liam Gallagher fighting.
If you're going to start singing the fucking songs as well as writing them, what am I doing, making the fucking tea?
Best part is the name of the tour was the Tour of Brotherly Love. It's actually kind of a good bit, though. Due to all the infighting, longtime drummer Steve Gorman finally broke up the main 3 of the band and left after, what was it, fucking 14 years, something like that. From 2001 to 2007-ish, there was a hiatus that involved a revolving door of band members to do live shows. That all came around Chris and Rich until it came time for their reunion album, which was released in 2008 and is called Warpaint. Warpaint reminds me more of their work on Southern Harmony, with a bit more of a southern flair to it. As usual, Rich has some great guitar riffs on this one, and I really like Locust Street. It sounds very Eaglesy to me, but the lyrics are worse on this album than usual and kind of just sound like they had a random grab bag of rhyming statements that don't connect and just pulled them out and inserted them in songs. It's not a bad album, but frankly, doesn't evoke a whole lot of emotion for me, so I'm just going to split the difference. I'm calling it a 5 out of 10. Critics gave it a 6.75. I don't know about that one. David Peisner actually wrote a review of Warpaint, absolutely ripping the album to shreds at some point in February, which confused the hell out of the Crowes because they had not even finished the album yet, let alone released it. And Peisner said that Maxim tried to pass off his preview of the album as an actual review, but Peisner gave the album a 2.5 out of 5, so like, if it's a preview, why are you giving it a rating? I'm just going to say this Peisner guy probably just sucks without doing any further research on the guy. The Crowes released Before the Frost Until the Freeze in 2009, which is definitely their most interesting album. The first half of the album was released as a disc, and then the second half was available for download from a code on that disc. The first side of the double album is more Lynyrd Skynyrd than the Faces, but the back half of the double album is literally a country album.
Meet me at the gate, at the garden gate. Meet me at the garden gate. You made a promise, now don't be late. Meet me at the garden gate.
If we were putting Southern rock bands on a country scale of ZZ Top to Charlie Daniels, they'd probably be closer to ZZ Top than they would Charlie Daniels, but it's still an interesting twist in their discography that I enjoy. I'm not going to pretend that songs are that great, but I enjoyed the variety in the music, and I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Critics gave it a 5.89, so hey, maybe I'm the one overrating this one. Once again, the Black Crowes went on hiatus with Chris and Rich refusing to talk to each other for years until the band got back together a decade later in 2019. Well, I'll say they kind of got back together. Chris and Rich are the only remaining original members, and they released Happiness Bastards in 2024, which is, it's meh. I don't know. If you love the Black Crowes, you're going to like this. If you're indifferent like I am, then there's probably not much for you here. They brought on Lainey Wilson to do basically nothing but have her name as a feature on the album, which is kind of annoying. Overall, I gave it a 4 out of 10. Critics gave it a 7.76 out of 10, which is definitely just some weird compensation for the fact you haven't heard him in like 12 years. Also, one critic from Classic Rock magazine described this album as a rockin' rollin' record that's funkier than Tramp's Cat. Rockin' rollin' record that's funkier than a Tramp's Cax, more soulful than a gospel convention, and warmer than your mother's love, and groovier than the Grand Canyon. What the? The band was actually nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame earlier this year in 2025 and seems to be doing well now, so good for them. To return to our starting question, how good were the Black Crowes? Were they overrated? Were they underrated? Or were they just rated? I will always have massive respect for this band for making the music that they wanted to make. They refused to bow down to current trends, to record labels, even to ZZ Top and their Miller Lite sponsorship. And to me, that's a true sign of someone who's in love with music as an expression or an art form instead of just a monetary device. Is that a fly or a fucking bird? They did an interview around 2001 where they constantly brought up them refusing to buck to trends when record labels and audiences were asking them to, and they get the utmost of kudos from me for that.
We can't sell out. Like I was saying, you can't offer me enough money to say, well, if you look this way and you sound this way, you'll be more famous and you'll make more money.
With that being said, this is a band at a time. This is a 70s Southern rock band who hit it big in the 90s with one great album at a time when music was still figuring out what it wanted to be for the decade. And by their third album, the music scene had passed them so far that there probably wasn't a world where the Black Crowes could have attained a decade of commercial success, especially in the 1990s. I also think this band should have experimented a bit more. They have some slight switches in their sound between psychedelia and southern rock, but it never felt like a true experimentation, but more additions upon what they've already done. I'm not saying it would have turned out great for sure, but I think they would have developed a larger and longer-lasting cult following had they gone in some different directions. The only real major curveball they threw in their music wasn't until their 2009 album Before the Frost, and by then they were essentially just, oh yeah, I remember that band from 20 years ago. In conclusion, they're a band with one great album, a handful of good albums, and a couple of meh albums. So, in my humble and slightly opinion, they are properly rated. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, I had to buy a green screen for it. I spent hours not only listening to the Black Crowes, but writing the goddamn script for this thing. And I also got attacked by a bug in the middle of it. So please like and subscribe. And if you think my music taste is shit, you're probably right.